Welcome back, and you're watching Morning Express here in KTN, and would like to now, get away from politics and speak something more humanitarian, get into people living with disabilities in the country today. And in studio with me to discuss more about people living with disabilities, not just in specific parts, but all across Kenya, is Dr. David Ole Sankok, who is... at the moment, he is the chairman, National Council of Persons with Disabilities, and we also have Hassan Harun, who is the executive director for NONDO, that is Northern Nomadic Disabled Persons Organization. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us in studio today. I'll start with Harun. Harun, you've been involved very much in helping people living with disabilities in the northern part of Kenya. What has that experience been like for you?
Let me say it was really indeed an interesting experience. I was not born with disability. I'm now 7 years.
Yeah, you weren't born with disability.
I wasn't. I was involved in road accident 2007. I've just marked this much, my 7th year as a person with disability. When I was on the other side, I never used to understand the challenges people with disability goes through, because in my family there is no person with disability. I never had a friend with disability, and it never occurred to me that it was going to come to me. So it wasn't very interesting. It wasn't a palatable thing to discuss. But when the reality came downing on me, and grew up in one of the most harsh and marginalized and developed part of this country, I started asking, then there are people with disability in such marginalized and underdeveloped part of the country. How are they living? In this marginalized setup, they are super marginalized within it. In the nomadic communities, people who are always on move with their animals in search of pasture and water. So how is it like to have a child with disability, a family member with disability? How is it like? That actually precipitated the thinking, the formation of Northern Nomadic Disabled Persons Organization that right now I head. We say then, how can we come up with a platform to advocate for inclusion and participation of people with disability in all spheres of life in Northern Kenya, especially among the pastoral communities of Northern Kenya? So I never thought it was interesting and exciting to be so much immersed into the issue of disability before. But it is very interesting. It has its own, just like any other thing, it has its own ups and downs, of course, but I think everything is in the way you really take it. So it's exciting, let me say.
Right. Yeah. Knowing that you're coming from a background where you weren't born with this disability per se, you just got it 7 years ago, and comparing the life then and the life now, what would you say from in between these 7 years have been the biggest lessons for you, especially knowing that we live in a community where maybe there's no equal distribution of resources?
Yeah, it's challenging to be a person with disability in Kenya, and also in generally in developing part of the country. Disability is much more of someone with an impairment and a barrier put right across this person. So if the barrier is removed, this person can, participate in the society freely, or near freely, to some extent. Personally, one of the greatest things that I've realized in my part, some part of my family members still believe I'm sick and I'm on transit, and very soon I will be well and wake up. But what I have noted also outside, the society tend to see your disability so much, sometimes, not in a bad faith, because we are so much structured that if you have disability, you're a little bit lesser. You always have to ask for, rely on sympathy and charity and things like that. So you find somebody just come to you over and pay you little things here and there, thinking still, disability is something that you have to really support in a kind of sympathetic kind of a nature. I find that quite to be very, very interesting. One of the most memorable things that I always remember, a friend once told me, we used to have some food at Sarit Center long before when I become a wheelchair user. Then he said, since you become a wheelchair user, did you ever went there? I told him, no. Can't we not go? It is very accessible. We went. Now, after we were done with our eating and we want to get into the car, our car was another car came parked close to it, so I cannot access with my wheelchair. So I have to wait for my friend to pull the car down. So while I was just at the pavement, people who were passing there, everyone was giving me present. Yeah, kijana kidogo hichika, I collected so many paperbacks.
Yes.
Yeah, now this friend, he has accepted me, but he never accepted my disability. Because he said, "These guys, they think that you are a beggar. You're a disabled person who's a beggar." I told him, man, it's not an issue. This is how the society was structured, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that kind of a mindset is so much still in the people. Well, it is not in a bad faith. I know most discrimination to communities with disabilities is not deliberate. It is the level of awareness in the society that is low.
It's very limited.
Yeah, yes.
All right, I'll now come to Dr. David Ole Sankok. You are the head of this body in the country that helps people with disabilities. Do we have numbers of how many we might be having in the country today? And then also, how many of them are children? How many are adults, if we have the numbers?
Yeah. For me, I grew up in a Maasai community down there in Narok, where disabled persons are considered to be a curse.
Yes.
And when a child with disability is born, what they normally do is to hide and say that the person actually gave birth to something which look like a cow or something look like a bird, so that they get the justification to kill that person. As you are aware, what happened in Uganda, the reign of Idi Amin Dada,
yes.
Persons with disability were bundled into a tipper lorry and then thrown into
and taken to
the water
Lake Victoria.
of Lake Victoria, the crocodile-infested waters of Lake Victoria, to be precise. So persons with disability generally, as my friend have highlighted, we face a lot of challenges. We are sometimes even killed. We are segregated. There's a lot of prejudice on persons with disability, and people tend to know and to see the outer part of the disability, that is the profound disability, like the physical disability, the visually impaired, and maybe the hearing impaired. But they rarely try to dig a bit deeper and see your abilities. So when they see you walking with a wheelchair or walking aids, what they will think is you on the field, you can't run. But how many Kenyans are running through their legs? Maybe Rudisha, Kemboi, yes? Most of us earn through our brains, through our hands, through our mouth like you. Yes, you earn through your mouth. So if you are physically disabled,
and my brain.
And your brain. Yes, your mouth and your brain. They must combine. So when I became disabled at the age of 12 years, when I was in primary school, I used to be very good in running, playing football.
So you weren't born this way?
Yeah, no, I was not born this way. I was. It was courtesy of a doctor's injection. Yes, when I went to an hospital, I think the doctor was a bit asleep because it was at night, and he didn't like the idea of us waking him at the middle of the night. So he injected me wrongly. But anyway, those ones are forgone, and actually I forgave him. Yes, because as Kenyans, we should focus on where we have met a problem and start solution right away, instead of thinking of our past and what we have left behind. So from your question, persons with disability in Kenya, according to the World Health Organization, it is 15% of any population. We actually estimate that persons with disability in this country are 3 million. And
3 million Kenyans.
Yes, 3 million Kenyans are persons living with disability. But disability is a club.
Yes.
It's a club that members are joining every now and then. Yes, you find that through these road accidents, through what have been happening in violence areas like what happened in Peketoni, the only problem we have is data collection. Because even the people in the media, you people in the media, when there is a road accident, you tend to count how many people died there. You don't say how many have been maimed. When there was Peketoni, what all 60 people were killed, but how many were disabled?
Right.
You know, we didn't get those figures. And those are people who are disabled, are the people who will become expensive to the society. People who have died, yes, tanua sanduku na mchele yenye watu watakula wakizika na mambo inaisha. But for those people who have become disabled, they will be very expensive to the society because one, they will not be paying taxes. Persons with disability don't pay taxes. Two, they will import duty-free vehicles. Three, they will need assistive devices. Four, there is also medical bills. Five, they will ask for grants. So you will find that they will be very expensive to the society, very expensive to the country.
But what are you as a body or as an organization helping? How are you helping Kenyans to get aware, especially Kenyans living with disabilities? How are you helping them be aware of some of their rights? For instance, you say if a Kenyan with a disability has to import a car, then it's tax-free. And you know, most of people with disabilities, maybe probably half of them or even more than half of them, are not aware of some of their rights. What are you as a body doing about it?
In fact, the government of Kenya have really done a lot. The Jubilee administration, though it's young, they have really done a lot to persons with disability. In fact, it have made us feel Kenyans, and even more important than the rest of the Kenyans, because we have almost a budget of 1.3 billion Kenya shillings. We have cash transfer to the severely disabled. These severely disabled members of our society are members who are maybe mentally disabled. They are members who are cerebral palsy. Those people who need the hand of somebody to be able to do anything else.
Right.
You know, they're severely disabled. Those people we cannot give grants because they cannot run businesses. They cannot do anything that is productive. But for that person who take care, the guardian that take care of this person and forget about their own daily duties, the government have come up with what we call a safety net, a cash transfer program, whereby those people are given a salary at the end of every month, which is normally 2,000. We are trying to bring it up, and we will discuss with the government so that it can be topped up. But at the moment, it's 2,000 for every Kenyan, and it's divided in terms of constituency. We now give 22,700 cash transfer and to persons with severe disability. And actually, this one, the money is normally collected in their post office. And we also have grants for those who want to do businesses. This one are given to groups. Yes, they are given to individuals who have shown that their business cannot be done as a group. Like the individual who want maybe to be singers. You know, you cannot sing as a group when you are, you cannot collect all the disabled love mnakuja kuimba, you know. So we give them individual grants. We also have scholarship for children with disability who are in school, and for persons with disability up to degree level, because we find masters maybe is a bit of somebody is already stabilized and is no longer vulnerable. Because this money for persons with disability are actually safety nets. They are for the vulnerable. They are like the youth fund, the women fund. So it is, even if you are a person with disability and you are rich, you are not supposed to be access to this money, because this money is meant for vulnerable.
For
just like
vulnerable.
Yes, the youth fund, just like the women fund. Yes, Her Excellency Margaret Kenyatta is also a woman, but it will be moral for her to apply for women fund. So that apply to other safety net, the money that are supposed to be for the vulnerable.
All right. I'll go back to Hassan. Hassan, you come from the northern part of Kenya, and I don't know if people living with disabilities there are aware of their rights, but maybe you can tell us more about that. And you can also tell us what the experience is, especially for people living with disabilities in semi-arid areas, areas that probably have very little, access to basic resources. What is that experience like for people living in those parts of the country?
In northern Kenya, sorry.
It's okay.
Generally, we lead from the tail if it comes to the development. Illiteracy is the highest, not only among persons with disability in the society. Access to education is not that much, it's not that much as compared to other part of the country. Access to proper health care, all these services, access to this is always a problem to the general society in northern Kenya. But for people with disability generally, then it is much more higher. So a person with disability, poverty and disability intertwines. The population of persons with disability, poverty in them is the highest. What makes them highest is if a child with disability cannot access education. He will never become viable in the society to a certain extent. He can't access employment, definitely. Then the poverty is there. He can't engage in economic or productive kind of lifestyle. So all these compounds, the situation of person with disability to be very stressing in that society. So I must admit that persons with disability in Northern Kenya are not aware of the gains or opportunities that the current dispensation has brought, including the devolution. People still don't know that there is a ways of fund and what are the percentage for people with disability. People with disability still don't know that within CDF, it is their right to access certain opportunity. Within the devolved service of the county government, it is their right. Like the employment, contracts. Actually, the 30%, we always have a problem with the 30% of youth, women, and persons with disability. Persons with disability is just annexed. But we actually request the legislators to clearly define that 10% for women is 10%. 10% for youth is 10%. 10% for persons with disability is 10%. What we have realized in most counties, for example, if they give 30, women are very aggressive. They pick 27. 2, youth pick. Then 1, a person with disability picks. Then you are saying youth, persons with disability, and women. So we want clear, segregation. And of course, we have to create serious awareness among persons with disability that it is their right to access opportunity now. It is never a privilege right now, whether it is employment or contract within the government setup. Like the 5% of employment is not so much highlighted. Of course, persons with disability in Northern Kenya, those who have at least have education, they are not getting employment because still the employers, they see their disability then their ability to move, the development forward. So I think level of awareness is very low, not only among persons with disability, among even, the stakeholders, to give them that opportunity, to access. For example, disability is on the rise across the globe. Again, according to World Health Organization, not because of road accident, insecurities that Dr. just has talked about, but in the moving population, like in Northern Kenya, where the hospitals are far distance apart, are ill-equipped, with no medical facilities, mothers still are not taking their children for immunization. So strange disease continues to paralyze a number of children. Measles are still there, making a number of children blind, because there is that huge campaign that is going on, to sensitize the society. So you can imagine then if that bulk in the pastoral communities, at that emphasis, because the pastoral communities, Dr. and I, we came from pastoral communities. Children are labor asset.
Yes.
Your child must look after the goat for you. He must look after the cow for you. So if he has disability, it becomes an extra burden to you. And you can imagine then in a situation where the services are distance apart, this child now resort to his disability. When he grows older, he now, resort to his disability to woo sympathy.
Okay. Well, in case you're watching us this morning, we are speaking to Harun Hassan, who is the Executive Director for Nondo, and we also have Dr. David Ole Sankok, who is the Chairman, National Council for Persons with Disabilities. And well, you might want to share your experience. Maybe you have a family member, a friend, or a relative who is living with a disability, and you want to ask a question to the two gentlemen we're having in studio today. You can use the SMS number that is 22155, and you can also visit our Facebook page, KTN Morning Express, or you can tweet us at Joy During Bira or at KTN Kenya, so we can be able to pass on those questions to the two gentlemen we're having in studio today. And there's a lot of corporate companies we have today. I do not know if the allowance, maybe you can tell us, Dr. David, you can tell us how the corporate companies today are receiving people with disabilities. Do we have any statistics that represent an improvement, or there's a drop in the treatment of people with disabilities, or according them the same rights?
First of all, Joy, I'll go back to what I was just discussing earlier about the government initiative to persons with disabilities, so that they will be aware and they can seek their rights, maybe in county government, in employment, because our constitution states very clearly that whether it is private employment or government employment, persons with disability must, it is the law, it is a constitution, must get 5%. And this one we are planning as a council to effectively start maybe doing, trying to do a survey on how many persons with disability are in the public service. You heard of the recruitment of policemen just recently?
Yes.
The other day. In fact, we are just watching out, because the first of their qualification, what they required was somebody must be physically fit to qualify to become to be observed in the police service. But then that one contravene our constitution, because our constitution does not read that we employ mandatory employment for persons with disability 5% except in the army forces or in the police force. No, it is general. So if it is general, we are watching very keenly, and if there are no persons with disability employed in the 10,000 police officers who have just been employed, then we will be forced to move to court and seek the interpretation of the same law, the Constitution of Kenya. The other thing is that persons with disability in Kenya, the government, we now have a principal secretary who is Honorable Joseph Tamkobe, who is actually a person with disability and became a principal secretary in the whole of pre and post independent era. We have never been considered as a group. So our marginalization in the new administration have really become something that is very low. And when normally in the public service and the public sector, if the government take a move and it make persons with disability to be more comfortable, you know, like the 30% tender allocation to women, youth and persons with disability.
Right.
The 5% mandatory employment and so many other things that the government is doing for persons with disability, the corporate world tend to follow suit. So we find companies like Safaricom, companies like Equity and other companies. And this is our passionate appeal to even those two companies that I have mentioned. I have not mentioned in whatever because I have mentioned them because they have really in the forefront fighting for the rights of persons with disability. I will make a passionate appeal to them to be with us, to participate in the Desert Wheel Race, which will be on 9th August in Isiolo. And I'm sure the Chief Executive Officer of Safaricom and the Chief Executive Officer of Equity, who is Mwange, will race with me in a wheelchair.
Yes.
And we'll compete with them.
Well, before we can get into the details around the Desert Wheel Race, I would like to know from you. There's been a lot of, scandals going on in the National Council for People Living with Disabilities, and I'm just wondering, are these allegations, do they hold any water, and are we looking at ways in which the body can be improved? Because much as we're looking at people living with disabilities, I mean, there are also all kinds of scandals, internal scandals going on within the body. What are you doing as a new board? What are you doing to let go of these scandals and allegations that have been placed against the body?
In fact, it is so pathetic that there is corruption in the disability sector. I find it out of the way. I find it immoral. I find it, I don't know. You know. So at the end of the day, as a new board, we have just been recently appointed, and we have sat with with my new board. And the first thing that we have said is that our cabinet secretary, Honorable Kazungu Kambi, actually inaugurated us. And what he said was that he is a man who does not tolerate anything to do with corruption. It is zero. It's not minimizing corruption. It's zero tolerance to corruption. And actually he made that very clear, and he actually insisted that we have to clean our house. And, in maybe next week, on Monday, we will be induction in Mombasa, whereby our new board members will be inducted in the state laws, the state corporation laws, so that they know what is required of them and what is needed of them. And immediately after the induction, our first step is to announce and advertise, and you'll see in your print medias and other medias and social media, that we will announce a vacancy in the Chief Executive Officer and the rest of the officers in the National Council for Persons with Disability, so that we shake up the whole secretariat, so that we have very clean people, and we will request that anybody, whether you are disabled or not disabled, you are supposed to apply, because we need a very, very competent Chief Executive Officer who will even not only depend on money from the government, the allocation from the government, from the budget, who will do for us what we call fundraising, who will be the face of persons with disability, who will have persons with disability as a passion, but not a way of making money.
Right.
And actually we shall clean that house. The other thing that we will do is that the persons with disability policies of accessing this fund have been very rigid. And you find very rigid and bureaucratic, and you persons with disability in most cases are actually illiterate. And we have policies that you have to follow. We have forms that you have to fill. You have proposals that you have to write. And those people who normally are very good in writing proposals, I'm sorry to say this, are incidentally con people, con men.
All right. So let me just go through some of the questions here that are coming in through our SMS line. Evans from Homa Bay saying, I have a disabled relative. Kindly let us know how one would register to benefit from the kitty. And that is the 2,000 monthly stipend. And we also have another coming in here from someone who doesn't leave their names. They're saying, I have a son who has been willed for the last 15 years and has been an asset, but no funds have been given to him. We also have another who doesn't leave his name again. There's a kid in Isiolo who is just on bed just because she has no wheelchair and she's now 10 years old. How can you help that child get a wheelchair? And we also have another question here. We wish we can be getting services from people living with disabilities. They really need a lot of help, and like some able officers. And we're having another here who is asking, I'm disabled. I have not been able to access any of the benefits as you are claiming. Even yesterday, he and his wife drove to APDK and they're just taking us around in circles. So those are some of the challenges, of course, that they are facing right now. But from where you stand, how can people be able to access these funds as fast as possible? Because knowing people with disabilities, of course, have to go through longer processes than the able-bodied people. How can they access these funds without having to be taken around in circles?
So the first thing, and I was just on that point, was that this issue of bureaucracy and this issue of this application, the policies. Yes, the government, you must meet these policies, because that's the only way we can communicate to the government that the money you allocated to us, this is how we have used that money. But we are trying to decentralize, because what we have known is that our constitution is for devolution. Why are we devolving even our own services, even in other sectors? It is because resources have been concentrated in some areas. So from the time go and my board have agreed that the first move we will make is to decentralize these services, to decentralize this money, so that we know how much is available for Mandera County, how much is available for Mombasa County, and so on. All right,
but that said, what are the steps for people to access the funds at the moment?
So the steps for people to access this money: one, you have to go to the social services offices, because we don't have the capacity. We have our regional officers in the regions. You can either approach our regional officer or go to social services offices. Once you have gone to social service offices, they will give you a form that will be filled, and this form will also be filled by the doctor, so that a doctor ascertain that you are disabled and what type of disability do you have. After that, there is also forms that you will have to fill, depending on your disability, or depending on which type of aid you require. Because there are others who are in school who may require scholarship, then there is a form for scholarship. And then there are those who will require assistive devices, there is a form for requesting for assistive devices. And then there is those who require grants to enable them, what we call economical empowerment, to enable them do a certain type of business. With that one, you have to fill a form, and also maybe have a small proposal that will be looked at by the BOT, that's the Board of Trustees, and approve the sum of money. Because we also know that even persons with disability are also human beings. Some of them are conmen, they have brick-faced kind of the DPOs or self-help groups, and they write very good proposals, very sweet proposal. When they have been approved, then they disappear with their money without the members knowing.
Where do the forms go after they've been filled in, and after how long do these people access the money?
After the forms have been filled, then you live with the social services officers, who will give to our regional officer. The regional officer will forward them to our office. It used to take a very long time, but today I can promise to all Kenyans living with disability and relatives of those persons living with disability that your money and the money that the government have given will reach all of them in a very short time. As far as they are...
Short time is what period of time?
Yes, that's what I am coming on. Once you have filled the forms and you have given, because I don't know how long you will take filling the form, but once you have filled the form and given to our regional officer, then that form will reach Nairobi within 2 days. And then from 2 days, we'll wait for a board meeting, because the board must sit to approve. Our board meetings meet quarterly. That is quarterly in a year. Because if we meet so frequent, we may end up using that money for allowances that is intended for persons with disability. So the latest that it can take is actually 3 months.
That's the latest it can take?
Yes, because the board must sit, yes, so that it can approve the money you have applied for.
So these people living with disabilities who are meant to receive funds, maybe say every month, do they also have to wait that long
no,
for the first batch of money to be approved?
For the first bunch, yes, for the first bunch, the board must sit and approve, because that's the government policy. And also will not delegate those duties for somebody else to do for us, because we have had issues of corruption, people who are not actually severely disabled being given that money, somebody who is not even disabled being given that money. So to safeguard that money, the board must sit, see the doctor's recommendation, see the doctor's documents, and actually approve that this person is actually deserve this money, and that this person must be poor.
Okay, right.
Now can I add something on what the judge has said?
Very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly. Yeah, I sit in the board with him, and we are only 1 month, and we haven't yet been inducted into state corporation. And coming from the question you have asked, it's a fact. Because of that allege that is carried by KTN people sometimes, the council is very unpopular among persons with disability, and we're now carrying that, on our back to revamp, reconstruct, the image back. And one of the most important thing we've realized actually as a new board, the council being in place for nearly 10 years, they have registered less than 200,000 persons.
Less than 200,000 persons
with disability.
Great.
And this year, we have signed in the performance contracting, we want to register 500,000 persons. And after the induction, we want to make public participation in the public service delivery of persons with disability. We want to open up people to submit memorandums to inform the strategic direction that this council has to take. If the devolution is bringing service closer to people, in fact, persons with disability need to have the service at their doorstep. Actually, at their doorstep, right at their doorstep. So we have to ensure that we have to come up with a policy to break all the hurdles and barriers and bureaucracy and protocols that makes a person with disability not to access opportunities.
Right.
Yes.
Now, as we wind up, of course, I'm just going to give you about 30 seconds to briefly talk about the Desert Wheel Race, because we're out of time. We know it's happening on the 9th of August in Isiolo County. What is the objective behind it? Very, very briefly.
The Desert Wheel Race is a flagship event of Northern Nomadic Disabled Persons Organization. And it is this year, it is in its third time. The last 2 years, the focus of the race was on mainstreaming disability into peace initiative. We bring the 7 counties of Northern Kenya and Isiolo. Why we have particularly picked on Isiolo, Isiolo is a rainbow county in terms of ethnic composition. Almost all pastoral communities in Northern Kenya are there. It's only here that you find Somali, Borana, Turkana, Samburu, name them. But they are always in conflict over the scarce resource of pasture and water. And one thing that is not always highlighted is the contribution of the conflict to the disability. And the people with disability are also disproportionately affected during the times of the conflict. So we felt that then how can we add a voice so that people with disability, the communities in Northern Kenya live in peace, and mostly the Moras are glorified to be great if they go and raid other communities for cattle rustling. But once they become disabled, it becomes, they abandon. Their skill is only their strength. This year, however, mainstreaming disability into peace initiative is our second objective, but this year our first objective is to amplify the cause of nomadic child with disability to access education.
All right, gentlemen, we are out of time and we can't go any further. But then, in case you want to participate in the Desert Wheel race, of course, you are very free to do that. Children with disability find it twice as hard to access education as compared to children without disability. And so the Desert Wheel race is aimed at ensuring that, funds are raised to support children with disability from northern Kenya to access inclusive education, and those among other objectives that this race is seeking to achieve. But well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you in studio today. Harun Hassan, who is the Executive Director for Nondo, and Dr. David Ole Sankok, who is the chairman for the body that deals with people with disabilities here in Kenya today. And well, 3 million Kenyans live with disabilities today, but how are you changing their lives for the better? And well, we will continue more of this discussion online. So many SMSs coming through, we'll have to forward them to the body itself, and they can be able to get back to you. But for now, thank you all for watching the show. Until tomorrow, have a good day.